peer pressure's always been a thing, right? That's nothing new. When you and I were younger, peer pressure in that age group was something that we dealt with. I think what's different now for our children is in a world of social media where everyone has the perfectly manicured life, where you can also have that sense of where FOMO becomes, it's always been bad. It's increasingly exaggerated, in a one to many world. Hey, I'm at this great place having these fun things and everything's perfectly manicured. And by the way, that's not life. That's not what life really is. Our children are going through some really challenging times. And I think it's always been hard, but I think the technology that enables us to do so much that we couldn't do before is really a double-edged sword. And by the way, it's finally coming out. You see what's happened with Facebook and the Facebook files, and they've known for a long time, what Instagram, how hurtful and harmful it is, especially to young teenage girls.
This episode is brought to you by Vimeo. I've been a pro user of Vimeo basically since I started my production company in 2010. Vimeo is for creative professionals like me, and I use it in several different ways. For example, it's a place for me to upload my videos with a password for my clients to be able to review and download the work I'm doing for them. There's no compression, crushing of black colors, or oversaturation like what I get when I upload a YouTube video. My clients get the full 4K resolution HD as it was intended. I also use it to host and broadcast live events. I also use Vimeo for my portfolio, case studies, and it never has annoying pre-roll ads. I can create a customized player and keep people on my landing page so they don't get distracted and go down the rabbit hole watching someone else's stuff. What you may not know about Vimeo is that you can use it if you're in HR or if you own a company. You can put all of those onboarding videos all in one place, a nice, tidy, professional-looking playlist or playboard where people can consume and understand or download all the new training videos all in one place. You could also do the same thing if you teach a course. Imagine putting all your videos behind a paywall, charging for it, and then sending people the link with a password. Need a videographer, creative director, or editor? Vimeo lets you post jobs and find creative professionals. There's a ton more options, so I would suggest checking them out. This episode is brought to you in part by our friends at WeWork. The reason I chose to have an office at WeWork is based a lot on flexibility. I started a decade ago as a one-person company, and now we have a growing team. WeWork has the space and budget for all my needs. From hot desks for one to a full office setup with multiple people, I can scale up or down whenever I need. I also love the community and other small business and entrepreneurs who work here. It's super collaborative and everyone is in the same boat, willing to help each other out. If you're interested in a tour, visit WeWork.com, search by your city and zip code for a WeWork near you. Now let's get back to our episode.
Hi, I'm Rob Siegel, a lecturer at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and you're watching Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
I usually ask my guests, how did you get this job?
It was kind of pure coincidence and luck. About 20 years ago, I was working in a semiconductor company, and I was in charge of strategy for the organization. And I ran a process inside of the company, and I wanted to get some feedback from one of my old professors at Stanford. So I called him up and said, "Hey, can I come see you?" And he said, "Sure." So I went and brought him, the work I had done at this company and that our team had done. And it was really, I didn't know if maybe there was an article in here or a book in here. And I'm showing him the work I did. And he looked at me, he said, "I don't know if there's an article or a book, but there is a case that we could write on the company and teach it here at Stanford. Would you want to help me write it? And then maybe you can come into the class and help me teach the case." And I thought that sounded like fun. So we did it. And then the next year we wrote another case. And then the next year we wrote another case. And then we had a couple of papers published. And within about 8 years, I was going to every class session. And then one day I got an email from the Graduate School of Business where I'm an alum. And it said, "Hi, welcome to the faculty as a lecturer." And on that day, I vowed they'd never get rid of me. And I would work really, really hard and be nice to everybody.
This show, we have a pretty diverse audience, but also it's pretty niched down. So it's both diverse and niche, if that's possible. Let me explain. So the diversity comes in both sort of psychographic, typical demographic, what you might imagine, and then all age and it's all over the map. So we have young people who are maybe coming out of high school who tune in, and I think they're in a place where they're trying to figure things out. And so I want to ask you, what were you thinking about when you were a teenager? What did you want to be when you grew up? Is that line. But I also want you to frame your answer for people who are sort of mid-career or even mid-age right now, because we're coming out of this maybe great reset where everyone's sort of rethinking. We've been working from home for a couple of years. Um, Everything has changed, and so there's this new opportunity to think differently. And so I like to identify signals and patterns to sort of be able to understand the road that we should take. How do we know what we should do? So what were you thinking about when you were a teenager?
So when I was a teenager, I was just a big fat loser. I was trying to think about how I was gonna, get beer and try to meet girls. I mean, let's face it, that was kind of what a teenage boy, growing up in Southern California thinks about, or a chunk of us. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I entered the University of California at Berkeley as a 17-year-old, and my roommate was working for a software company. And this was the mid-'80s. And I played with computers, but like I didn't really know what software or how it was made. And I was thinking about studying engineering. And I said, okay, I need to make some beer money now that I'm in college. And so I ended up going to work for the software company part-time, and I loved it. I loved the technology, I loved the people, I loved the energy, and I kind of fell into tech. And as I look at how my career progressed, it was really a series of steps that I don't know that I was very purposeful about. Like certain opportunities presented themselves. And at a moment in time, I kind of got lucky several times. When I went to Intel, I met somebody on an airplane, and that he was happened to be an executive at Intel, and we developed a friendship. And I eventually went to work for him. And then when I started my first company, it was a random idea that I had, so I went and started the company. And so what I would actually coach people to do, and what I tell my students, is I often ask them to think about where do they want to be in 10 years, and like holistically, not only in their career but in their lives. How do they think about their relationships, if they want to have a partner, if they want to have a family, whether it's relationship to their community, and how can they design a life that allows them to encompass, say, the 5 key variables in their life that they're playing for. And maybe a couple of those are career. And if you know where you want to be in a decade, you can then work backwards and say, well, okay, in my next job, what are the 5 or 6 things I need to learn that will put me on that journey to help me get there? And that doesn't mean you're going to achieve it. It doesn't mean you're going to get there, but it gives you that opportunity to at least be purposeful in your actions. And I think that's more important than trying to kind of plan everything out to like the last digit and to know that every step to take. And sometimes you just kind of have to go with the flow of the universe, but march in a direction that you think would make you happy, or you think that you might enjoy yourself.
I love that advice. And you're in good company, actually. So I just had Debbie Millman on the show. And I don't know if you know Debbie, but she is a designer and voted by like Fast Company magazine and many others as one of the most creative people in the world. And actually, Debbie teaches. Where does she teach? Now I feel really bad. Is it New York School of Design? Debbie, forgive me if I've just got that wrong, but it's one of the top design schools in New York, and almost verbatim, that's her advice to her students as well. Um, and she treats it sort of like a time capsule that you should write these 10-year plans down, and then navigate. Or reverse engineer, however you want to word it, and then see if it doesn't come true. And she says it's remarkable how accurate, when you sort of um, you know, start your trajectory, how close you get to the actual goal. It's amazing.
I think being purposeful is actually kind of more important. One of my colleagues on the Stanford faculty, Jennifer Acker, and another one of our colleagues, Suchi Huang, did research that said if you work towards a goal but you actually enjoy the journey, you enjoy when you get to the goal ultimately anyways, versus if you're only focused on the goal and don't enjoy the work and the what it takes to actually get there. And the nice thing about thinking about 10 years forward and thinking about maybe the 5 key variables you want to focus on is, you can do that exercise every 5 to 7 years, and maybe you have new goals that you want to work towards, or a new life that you want to live. And so you can, make changes. Maybe some variables come on and some variables come off. But again, you can be purposeful and also constantly renewing yourself. And in a world that's constantly changing, and changing at an accelerated rate, mind you, I think that notion of being purposeful, but also being flexible and open to change is really, really critical.
Yeah, and I want to underscore because it maybe was subtle, maybe people missed it, but it was very, very important what you said, and that is, at least from my experience. So I have a 13-year-old son who's still at home, and even from him, I feel through him a little bit of the pressure that he feels, anxiety, to have it all figured out already. he's in seventh grade, and already he's thinking, "Oh man, I've got to have my career path mapped out. Where I'm going to go." So I was like, "Put the brakes on, son. Pump the brakes. It's okay, actually. You can set big, lofty goals. I'm glad you want to play in the NFL, or run a huge company, or get to Mars. Whatever you're going to do, those big, big goals. But like, it's okay to not have it figured out. And just like you said, it's okay to pivot, change your mind, do 180. You know, um, I think I think life in general is about trying stuff on for size. Sometimes you think it's going to,
Exactly.
yeah, sometimes you think it's going to look good on you, and you go, you know what? I don't look that great in polka dots. Uh,
Peer pressure's always been a thing, right? That's nothing new. When you and I were younger, peer pressure in that age group was something that we dealt with. I think what's different now for our children is in a world of social media where everyone has the perfectly manicured life, where you can also have that sense of where FOMO becomes, it's always been bad. It's increasingly exaggerated, in a one to many world. Hey, I'm at this great place having these fun things and everything's perfectly manicured. And by the way, that's not life. That's not what life really is. Our children are going through some really challenging times. And I think it's always been hard, but I think the technology that enables us to do so much that we couldn't do before is really a double-edged sword. And by the way, it's finally coming out. You see what's happened with Facebook and the Facebook files, and they've known for a long time, what Instagram, how hurtful and harmful it is, especially to young teenage girls.
yeah. Let me get you to weigh in on that just while we're on it. This show is called Behind the Brand. We talk a lot about brands and branding, brand strategy. Um, you come from, the business world, but you're also, you have your hands in investing, and now you're an educator in academia. What's your take on the rebrand? Good idea, bad idea, head the right direction? What are your thoughts?
All right, so if this is going to be one person's opinion, I think rebranding was a good thing because Facebook is basically a toxic brand. There's nothing positive now associated with that brand. So I think coming up with a new brand that's kind of almost why not. I'm not a huge fan of Meta. And this is probably end up sounding like a curmudgeonly gnome, but that comes from the metaverse, the Neil Stephenson book Snow Crash, which was written in 1992. All right, so people have been talking about virtual worlds like forever. This is not a new thing. And so, Zuck has basically thought this is the coolest thing ever, and they bought Oculus, and they think it's just so great that everyone's going to wear these goggles. There was one of the world's leading researchers at Stanford, Jeremy Bailison, just taught his first class. Actually all in virtual reality. Here's the thing: the class could only be 30 minutes long because people get sick if they wear these things too long. And so, Facebook is hanging its hat from a brand strategy standpoint, on something that makes people sick. By the way, I've experienced this. When I go over to the engineering school and I put this stuff on, you get dizzy after a long period of time. Like, it's okay for a few minutes. So I just think a lot of the virtual world stuff, while it might be good for entertainment, it'll be good for snippets. I don't believe it's going to take over the world in terms of communication and business and stuff like that. I think it's going to be a nichey thing. And by the way, the hardware is really expensive, etc. Now, it could be that this is the time where finally the technology is going to come together and the product's going to be great. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I mean, the iPad wasn't the first tablet, but it was the first one that got it right. And so I think the difference is Jobs actually put out a great product, and then everyone went, yes, this makes sense. All they did was change the name. We still don't have a great product, and we still don't have a great metaverse.
Yeah, I like that line of thinking, and I can get on board with everything you said. In my opinion, it may also very easily just be a distraction, right? Like, hey, pay no attention to all the garbage we've been doing. That's now because of whistleblower evidence that we know is factual, not just speculation. It could just be.
And they've been a dumpster fire for 12 years. This is not new. They've hidden, the privacy tools and moved them for a long period of time. The Cambridge Analytica crisis. Like, this is not a big revelation. This is just the next in line of a series of things. And for the first time, they got caught with a smoking gun.
Yeah, and that's why I tend to think it's more of a distraction. The other thing it could be is kind of like what Google is famous for, and that is, they acquire a company not to grow it and make it successful. They just acquire it so someone else can't get it. And so, Mark may have gotten Oculus because uh, maybe without any long-term plans, he just thought, well, I better scoop that up before, and then fill in the blank. What other company gets it to sort of defeat the possible competition? Who knows?
I mean, that's entirely possible. I guess what I would say is that he has spent a lot of time talking for years about virtual reality. He brought, Hugo Barra in, which is a well-known executive here in Silicon Valley, who went from Google to Xiaomi in China, and Facebook brought him back to the United States. I actually think Mark believes it. I worry, not worry. I wonder if it's what it's sometimes referred to as the Silicon Valley reality distortion field. Is that this geeky person thinks this is the coolest thing in the world? The question is, does anybody else think it's a cool thing? And we've seen this before. Like, a lot of people have been doing, want to do virtual worlds and everything else. This is not new.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Second Life as an
Yeah.
experiment, and I mean, who knows? We had the Palm Pilot, and then we had the BlackBerry, and then eventually, Steve and Apple and crew perfected that thing to where, well, the mobile phone business was a boring business, and they turned it into a very sexy business that revolutionized the world. So maybe it's too early to speculate, but I'm, I have my doubts about Facebook. And the other interesting thing is that Jack Dorsey stepped down from Twitter this week, and that's another
Yeah.
big brand move. And then he rebranded his company from Square to Block, almost just added several sides. I personally would have gone with Rhombus. It's a bit obtuse, but that's the point.
Well, but now that if you read the press release and whatever, they were saying, oh, it's about like the neighborhood block and stuff like that, blockchain, crypto. You know, Square is worth $98 billion, or now Block is worth $98 billion. I don't, for some reason, they thought they needed to change the name. I think it has to do more with cryptocurrency. Jack is very high on cryptocurrency, thinks, it's going to, replace currencies around the world. He's a pretty smart person. So I think it had more to do with that. But, Square is a very well executing company. And so I'm not sure why they felt so compelled to change the brand, but okay. I mean, maybe it's one of these things where he's gotten so much heat, especially with him being at Twitter, that if he changes the name of where he spends now most of his time, no one will notice that it's the same dude.
Well, I was talking to Scott Galloway and some of these others, and all of us were sort of again speculating, and the move that everyone sort of was thinking was that maybe uh, Jack, has left Twitter to go full time into Block, but now will have the means through a fintech company to come back and buy Twitter. And we thought, oh, that would be interesting.
I've heard that a lot. I guess the Twitter's market cap's 32 billion. It would only cost about 30% of Block to buy Twitter, but it's kind of, it, what about all the people who were there? Like what would that be like? It just seems like it would be kind of a strange thing. And then you've got activist investors inside of Twitter, so like they would find it too. I can kind of get the impression he doesn't want to deal with the headache of dealing with something like that. And a deal like that would get reviewed by the government and the FTC and the DOJ. So it's entirely possible. We'll see if he does it. I don't think we're going to get big mergers out of tech for a while. I think, people are thinking tech is too big already. And so big mergers that make big tech bigger, I'm skeptical that those will get approved by Washington.
Well, although I really did like Mark Benioff's move with Salesforce and Slack. I thought that was a brilliant, collaboration. I think that seems like a natural fit. Let me ask you too, because I know that you're a pretty active investor. Do you want to weigh in on the Slack move?
Well, I was just going to say, nobody thinks Benioff's evil, in the way that they think Twitter's evil or Facebook's evil, or even some people think Google is evil. So I think Benioff was able to get away with it. I don't know that he could get away with it now, to be honest with you. I think it would get a good look. A $27 billion acquisition would get a good hard look from the government.
Yeah, that's fair. So I know that you have your hands in investing, and in your book is finance focused. So let's weigh in a little bit on a personal investment strategy. Do you have what's your overall feeling about tech stocks and cryptocurrencies right now? State of the union.
Well, now most of the investing that I do personally is in private companies through various venture funds, and so what I'm seeing in the market and in the private markets is that valuations are very high, and there's big deals, big money's coming into fewer and fewer companies. So we've seen consolidation not only of venture funds but also of the deals that are getting done. There's fewer of them and more money going into those fewer deals. Now, I think there are booms in certain sectors. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What categories or industries do you have your money invested?
Well, we invest generally in through Exceed, which is one of the funds I'm involved in. We invest in a lot of what I'll call mainstream technology, software and artificial intelligence and machine learning solutions. I'm a venture partner in a fund called Piva, and they do a lot of climate tech investing as well as what's sometimes referred to as Industry 4.0, which is going to, the reinvention of manufacturing and of making things and alternative, materials. So, the things that we're investing in are pretty broad based. There are certain sectors that are very hot right now. Obviously, climate tech is very hot. Anything crypto is just on fire right now. And so, and there will be losses that come out of these things. Right now it's almost like there's so much volatility. It's a lot of speculation, and money is made in times of speculation, and money is also lost in times of speculation. And so, kind of like when the first internet bubble came through, there was an overinvestment in optical networking, and a lot of those companies did really well and then went bankrupt. But the optical networking fiber that they laid on a global basis became the backbone for what we're doing right now on a global basis for communication and collaboration tools. So it's unclear necessarily who the specific winners will be, but the investments in the area will lead to future technologies and future consumer and business uses.
Yeah, I mean, in the scheme of things, we're probably with Web 3.0, we're probably around 1997, and not even close to '01 with the tech bubble burst. It's very, very interesting times.
Yeah, I try not to predict exactly when things are going to collapse. So I don't know if we're in 97, 98, 99, or early 2000, but we're before March 2000. I know this. It's not yet March, March 2000. It's before that.
A personal question: do you have Tesla stock? Are you watching Tesla?
I do. I watch it, but I don't own Tesla stock.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. Again, back to branding and how influence can take a part in that, and how one person, the voice and the face of the company, the brand, can be so influential. I think it's quite an anomaly. I can't think of any other case.
Elon's Iron Man. Like, he's Iron Man. He lands rockets on barges in the middle of the ocean. Okay, if he gets hit by a bus, Tesla stock would not be where it's at today. So he's kind of one of these, once a century entrepreneurs and business leaders. And he's done it, by the way, multiple times, right? PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, what he's doing with the Boring Company. So the thing about Elon is, you can't, that's not normal. Now you're looking as an investor for outliers. So like you follow people like Elon. Yeah, things might go down sometimes. There might be volatility, but a lot of times they go up. It's the same thing with Mayoshi Son, Masa and SoftBank. Over 30 years, he's been a good bet, even if there's been volatility along the way.
Yeah, and speaking of Masa, I mean, he's the one that sort of swooped in and saved WeWork from that dumpster fire, and sort of picked that company up for a song. And there's another brand that sort of primed, kind of like when they launched right around the recession time, 2008. I feel like, at least personally, the timing couldn't be better for WeWork to have another sort of windfall season, because the work from home and the whole remote thing, everything's changed, and so they're primed and ready, maybe over ready, over surplused, with space for people that need flexible office arrangements.
Well, if you look at what Sandeep, the new CEO, what he did there, he's a real estate and turnaround person at heart. And so like he understands how to fix the situation. So the first thing they did is they got their cost basis under control. Then they renegotiated a lot of the leases that they had. And so now, if assuming that we can get in front of these, various variants that keep coming, as things slowly start to open up, and that will happen, there's going to be flexible work, just like you talked about. So, having big campuses just for one company may not make sense. And in fact, with WeWork, I think 40 or 50% of their business now is not startups, but larger organizations who are designing that flexibility in. So they could be very well positioned. And, strangely enough, Adam Newman always said it was a movement, we're a tech company. And it was like, no, you're a real estate company. Sandeep cleaned it up and made it, thought of it as a real estate company. But a lot of the underlying technology that they used to run WeWork, hoteling, scheduling desks, all the other things that go along with that are going to have value to other companies as well. So the irony in this is they may end up selling some of the tech or licensing the tech to other people for use because everybody's work habits are going to change. And so even if you don't go into a WeWork place, you might use WeWork's technology to help run your own office.
Yeah, here's a weird comparison for you. Uh, WeWork and McDonald's are the same because when McDonald's first got into the business, Ray Kroc was confused that he was in the fast food business, and he wasn't. He was in the real estate business. And that's actually how he, made his fortune and grew McDonald's to what it is today. He thought of it as, a retail franchise. He would buy the land and then have uh, the folks buy the restaurants and rent through him. And then all of the technology that he developed, whether it's the milkshakes or the process, kind of like uh, a Ford-esque assembly line for food, he would pioneer that and then license that out to other people. But I like what you said. I spoke to Sandeep 2 weeks ago. Really smart guy. I'm super impressed.
Yeah. He is an amazing person. If all goes well, I'm hoping he's going to be visiting one of my classes next quarter at Stanford, and if all goes well, I might have some. I might have something to say on this space in the next few weeks. But let's wait and see.
One more question then for WeWork and Stanford, since you're a Stanford guy. Do you see the possibility, as classrooms, virtual classrooms expand, or the idea beyond the walls of, the burgundy there, the cardinal, what do we call it? What is it? The cardinal red?
Cardinal. It's Cardinal. It's just we are Cardinal. We are the Stanford Cardinal, not the Cardinals. That's a bird. We're the Stanford Cardinal.
Yeah. Beyond the walls of the cardinal, uh, do you see maybe facilities like WeWork being sort of extension or satellite offices or classrooms for students who may not be able to travel, to Northern California, etc.?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think education will never be the same because of the pandemic. As one of my colleagues said to me today, before the pandemic, 2% of the instructors in the world, maybe 1% knew how to teach remotely, and now 98% do. And so we've learned not only how to teach remotely, we've learned also how to uh, you know, in the spring, I taught hybrid, where I would have 30 students in the room and another 45 online, all on Zoom, and we learned how to make that work, where you could teach that simultaneously. And so, my ability to reach people all over the world through this camera that I'm, using right now is truly incredible. And so, like, there was one day last month where, my morning I was teaching executives in Oman in the Middle East. I went to Stanford and taught two classes a few miles from my home. I went back and then went online and taught some entrepreneurs in South Korea at 5 p.m. And then at 10 o'clock, I was giving a speech to a bunch of executives in Kuala Lumpur. And so I think education will change. And as we learn about these blended environments where sometimes the instructor's remote, sometimes some of the students are remote, sometimes it's both, there are many, many ways that education will be allowed to touch and reach other people.
Amazing. Let's use that as a transition to talk about your book. You're very enthusiastic and also very um, skilled teacher. I mean, you just basically broke down some very complex ideas and concepts into, this brain, which could only handle little bits at a time. So I appreciate you. I think that's an underestimated and maybe undervalued skill that a lot of people like you have. Talk about this book, why you wrote it, who you wrote it for.
So the book is called The Brains and Brawn Company: How Leading Organizations Blend the Best of Digital and Physical. And it came out of, as I was bringing guests into several of my classes at Stanford, and as I was watching a lot of the startups in Silicon Valley, I was finding that companies that were winning really combined the best of digital and physical. And so one of the courses I teach is called The Industrialist Dilemma. And the idea behind the industrialist dilemma is we said, okay, tech companies are now going after traditional organizations and traditional industries like mobility and healthcare and financial services. And so the new Silicon Valley people are just going to come in and completely take over. And we were wrong. What we found was great retailers had figured out how to blend digital and physical and absorb and learn from the disruptors, but they held on to certain competencies that they were good at. And similarly, the disruptors who were really good also understood that they couldn't just stay behind a screen slinging code all day, that if they were going to be in these businesses, you couldn't just outsource manufacturing. You had to really understand things like supply chain and manufacturing. And so we came up with the framework of the Brains and Brawn Company. And with the brains, we looked at 5 different digital attributes that kind of are ways that important attributes that companies need to have for winning. So things like the left hemisphere, which is using analytics, the right hemisphere, having creativity, the amygdala, empathy for your employees, for your customers. We looked at the prefrontal cortex, how do you deal with risk? And finally, we looked at the inner ear, which is how you balance ownership and partnership. And on the brawn side, on the physical side, we looked at like the spine. How well do you do logistics? We looked at muscles. Can you operate at scale on a global basis? We looked at hands. How are you at making things? We looked at hand-eye coordination, which really kind of gets you, how do you shape and drive your ecosystem? And then finally, stamina. Can you survive over time? And so we looked at a bunch of the companies where, I'm really lucky, Brian. Like, I'm not that interesting, but I happen to work here. So I'll get CEOs from all over the world who will come to my class and they'll share their learnings and they'll let us write about their company and study their company. And so in the book, we were able to share what we have been able to see at Stanford and put it in a way that hopefully people can relate to. And then they can look at their own companies. So you asked who I wrote it for. I wrote it not only for executives and senior level managers, but even junior managers to understand what's happening in the world and how can I look at my organization? And then the last chapter, we write it on an idea called systems leadership, which is a different class that I teach. Systems leadership, the idea is that leaders of tomorrow and over the next couple of decades, because everything is connected, they really need to see the entire system. They need to understand how things fit together. And so they need to understand there's interactions between groups inside of a company, say manufacturing and marketing, that impacts and sends ripples throughout the organization. Or your company interacts with its suppliers or its channels. And there's a lot of data now that's flowing back and forth. And systems leaders need to understand these types of interactions. And so we describe some examples of great systems leaders that we studied and try to point to them so that people could say, oh, I get that. Now I think I know some of the behaviors maybe that I need to model, or maybe I need to change a little bit, what I was doing before to take advantage of the new world order.
Can I ask, what surprised you in your research that you didn't expect?
I guess a few things. The first was from the incumbent side, the large organizations, the women and men who run those companies, they get it. They are not dinosaurs who are going to die. They are
throw down a
they
name.
are on top of.
Throw down a name so we have context. Who are we talking about?
All right. So for example, Target, Brian Cornell and the leadership of Target, they really do blend digital and physical well. I look at somebody like Craig Meany or Home Depot. They do a great job. AB InBev takes risk really well. They're smart about how they do it. So the incumbents, I think, really do some great things. Charles Schwab, how they handle analytics. They're thoughtful about using data and how they use data, and just as importantly, how they don't use data. Now, on the other side, what was surprising to me was the disruptors. Like there's a company called Desktop Metal, which does 3D manufacturing. They understand the physical world. They are not just, hi, we're going to have a new machine and throw it out there. They're very thoughtful about where will the factory be placed? You could put the factory at your customer, and the customer can actually make the parts they need there. 23andMe, which is a company, in fact, we were introduced to their CEO through Ann Wojcicki, right? So if you look at what Ann's doing, Ann's really thought through not only how to get the data that we have for our DNA, but also how to partner with a company like GSK for drug development and manufacturing. So I think what surprised me was like the great leaders really understood the other side. And that was, I think, my big aha. I kind of expected people in Silicon Valley to have a digital only mindset, and that wasn't true. The great leaders understood digital and physical. And similarly, in the incumbent organizations, I used to work at GE. I was amazed at how well the leaders there, the women and men who run those companies, understand what needs to be done in order to execute well.
Let me ask you two things that come to mind. One is Amazon, and I see even in my local neighborhood little Amazon grocery stores. Now, most people know that they acquired Whole Foods. That's different. That was maybe they did that for key learning. Maybe that was a strategic acquisition. Maybe it was a distribution play. But I also see dedicated Amazon grocery stores, which may end up sort of being like a Walmart superstore at some point. Um, this is kind of what you're talking about, right? People who understand, like Bezos. Yeah.
Exactly. We're a physical species. Like the whole this notion that everyone was going to work from home forever, wrong. Like we actually like being with people. And so, the great companies understand like the stores aren't going to go away. Sometimes, by the way, you need something. So you want to go out and experience that. And so that's why you'll go to a store and go shopping. Clothes you might want to try on in the store. Sometimes you can have it sent to your house like Stitch Fix does. But sometimes you want to go out and have that experience. Similarly, if you need toothpaste, they may not be able to get it to you quickly. But if you can get it at your local store, you'll run down and go get it if you need to. So I think the great companies understand that the world is and the last thing I'll say, especially with new brands, like a direct to consumer brand, those stores are also kind of the ability for experience goods to put them out there to try them. Like if you want to buy a Casper mattress, right, you can go to a Casper store and try the mattress before you buy it. And they don't have to keep the.
Yeah, that was going to be my next comment is it seems like Casper's a great example, and there's several others. We actually just did a great story with Matteo Franceschetti, who is the CEO and founder of 8 Sleep, a great brand, technology mattress. But I was thinking of cars, actually. So the way you buy a car is now disrupted. What is it? Is it called Canva? What is that online?
Carvana?
Sorry. Yeah, it's Carvana. And even Tesla, has been doing this for a while where you can go into a mall and there's like a Tesla store. It's so weird. Cars parked in there, and then you can place your order and order your car, I guess. So what's the takeaway lesson then for companies that are not Carvana and not Casper and not Amazon? The guys and gals who maybe are just in development. What's the lesson?
Well, I think you want to figure out, why do people go to the store? Do they need, for example, to take it away right away? So Tesla has the advantage that they're selling direct and they can cut out the channel, right? And the notion of a dealer network, right? The notion of the way franchisees work for the large automotive companies that's what gave the automotive manufacturers the ability to kind of get reach. But now with digitization, like you don't need to do that, and so you don't have to buy the big real estate. You don't have to buy car lots. You don't have to do those things. And so for certain types of products, actually you can deliver it in a particular way that's more effective, more effective for the customer and more effective from a cost basis. There are certain products you will want to take away, and so like you will want to have a store for them. So is your store a showroom and then you deliver it directly to somebody's house or to their business, or is it a place that you're going because you need to do something in the store itself?
Yeah, just something that came to mind as you were talking. I guess I put my finger on why I like the Carvanas and I like the Tesla shop. It's because the experience as it exists today is terrible. I don't want to go buy a car at a car dealership because it's horrendous. And so maybe that's the opportunities. Maybe that's the white spaces, or that's the place to start is your current experience horrendous? And if so, maybe you could take that offline.
That's an opportunity. It's funny. I end up buying a lot of my toiletries from Amazon, because half the time I would go to CVS, they wouldn't have the dental floss that I wanted, or they wouldn't have my brand of deodorant. So I'll go onto Amazon and buy 6 at a time. Like I'm gonna do that. That's a kind of a repeat purchase. I don't mind buying 6, and it's not that huge of a dollar commitment to buy, 3 things of deodorant or 6 tubes of toothpaste. But I'm gonna get what I want. It's delivered to the house. That's way better than my having to drive to the store and then they don't have it in stock, right? And so
Yeah. The other thing that comes to mind, and forgive me for just sort of riffing off of your good brain, but I also think that maybe, in places or industries where there's already established trust and knowledge, we all know what a car is. We basically know how it works, even if it's highly technical or luxury. It's an automobile, right? So it's got 4 wheels generally, an ignition, either it's electric, EV, or it's gas. There's not a lot of convincing we need to do that, so maybe that's another opportunity to look for, is like you can sort of ride off the goodwill and sunk costs of all these other giants, incumbents that they've built the foundation for you to sort of slide right in there and take advantage of the consumer trust that's already in place.
exactly. Economists would say, is something an experience good or is it not an experience good? And an experience good is you want to see it, touch it, and feel it before you buy it. And a great example of that is the Nest thermostat. When Tony Fadell and the team at Nest, they didn't cut out the channel. So what they did was they actually did deals with Home Depot and Lowe's to make sure that when you walked into the store, there was a beautiful end cap display so that you could touch the dial and feel how well it was designed. And then when you went to buy it, they realized that the enemy was the contractor who installed the thermostat. That was the real problem. And so what they were able to do is when you go to buy it, the retailer would hand you, here are the 5 authorized contractors in your area who could install this properly for you to make sure it got connected correctly to the internet. And so I think that was kind of one of the key things that Tony and the team figured out, that cutting out the channels not always the answer.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for working that out with me and putting it into legitimate legitimate terms. I appreciate that. My mind
It
just
was legitimate the way you described it, Brian. It was totally legitimate the way you did. I'm just building on what you said.
I'm fascinated with the book. Give us maybe some final words here as we round third base coming home. Um, Maybe some of your personal advice, from the vantage point of this hindsight. You've done these case studies. They sound like very sophisticated case studies, and deeply researched and vetted. So kind of give us the advice. And again, we're talking to the majority of people that are watching are probably 30 something, mid-career, go-getter men and women who, are really trying to find the secret sauce, right? What's the key to success?
All right, so a few key points. The first, we've talked about a few of them. The first, I'm going to say, winning companies going forward are going to blend digital and physical. And so the thing I would ask, potential readers to think about is your company blending digital and physical, or is it only doing one or the other? The second thing is, incumbents are not doomed and disruptors are not ordained. Like, this is like the games are in times of volatility. Games can be won, and we're headed into times of disruption and times of volatility. And it's not just like the new young kids are going to get it right and the old people are going to die. Some of the old dinosaurs will die, and some of the old dinosaurs will get stronger. Some of the disruptors will come in and succeed, and some will fail. The last thing I would say is that really, as leaders, we need to change how we manage and how we lead on things. When I talk about systems leadership, it's infinitely more important to be able to see intersections, how to manage operationally excellence, but also know how to manage innovation, and how to have what we call a product manager's mindset. Do you understand customers? Do you understand engineering? Do you understand how the sales force works? The importance of communication and managing context in a world where there's so much information. Alvin Toffler coined the phrase information overload in Future Shock in 1970. That's accelerating. And leaders need to be really good at managing context. Jeff Immelt, my old boss at GE and my colleague at Stanford, says that truth equals facts plus context. So I think those are kind of the key 3 messages of blending of digital and physical. Incumbents are not doomed and disruptors are not ordained. And great leaders going forward will be systems leaders. And kind of like anybody can do this. It's a choice. It's a choice that people make to act and behave and learn and get in front of what's coming. There's nothing that stops individuals and companies from being great.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. tracking my roots, where I came from and where I'm going. But like I say, man, always said it. It's not about the destination. No. It's all about the journey. Ain't nothing changed but the weather. The dangling carrot that hang from the rear view. Your dreams in the past ain't nowhere near you. Backseat drivers got nothing but 2 cents. Shotgun riders too biased, they all liars. I should get an A for effort, I'm too tired, but I'm never giving up. That's why I'm kinda admired.